She sat at the table, bound, blindfolded, trembling in her hands. And the voiceover said, "You thought you'd beaten them? Your mom is your last slip." That was James Carter's mother, a former internal affairs agent, the man who brought down the system from the inside. But how did he let it happen? How did the hero who exposed police corruption end up on his knees to those he himself had put away? The answer didn't start here. It started in one house, one elderly woman, and one officer who decided it was too old for her to fight. If you want to hear a story that will take your breath away, if you care about the game-changing truth, then click like, subscribe, and get comfortable. The officer was smiling when he stepped onto her porch. That fake, friendly kind of smile, the one that never reached his eyes. Mrs. Lillian Carter, 81 years old and no fool, saw right through it. He called her ma'am, but it sounded like girl. Asked if her son was home, though he knew well enough she lived alone. Then he asked to come inside, routine neighborhood check, he claimed. Something about a break-in down the street. She opened the door, not because she trusted him, but because old habits die hard. You respect the badge. Or at least, you used to. By the time she realized what was happening, it was too late. The man with the badge, Officer Kevin Reddick, stood in her living room with her mother's jewelry box in his hand. His expression had changed. The courtesy was gone, replaced by something colder. Something cruel. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "Ma'am," he said again, softer this time. "Don't make this hard." She stared at him. Her eyes did not waver. "You picked the wrong house." He smiled. "No, I don't think I did." But he had. Because upstairs, tucked in an old chest, was a photograph Lillian and her son, James, taken the day he graduated from the FBI Academy. Because James Carter wasn't just her son. He was internal affairs. And he was coming home that very night. Officer Reddick slipped the box into his jacket, eyes flicking toward the door. "You won't say anything. I know your type." "You don't know a damn thing about my type," she said, her voice now low and laced with fury. He left like he'd done nothing. But he left behind fingerprints. Left behind a camera's gaze. And left behind a woman who knew how to wait. When James pulled into her driveway 4 hours later, she was waiting on the porch. She didn't cry. She handed him the tea she always made. And then she said 4 words. "He stole from me." James listened. Then he asked her to start from the beginning. He didn't take notes. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. Because he knew this wasn't about theft. This was about a man who wore the law like armor and used it like a weapon. And he was about to find out what happens when you cross the wrong woman and her son. James didn't drive back to headquarters that night. He sat at his mother's kitchen table, surrounded by the smells of lavender cleaner and old pine floors, the place where he'd grown up. She poured tea into his favorite chipped mug, the one with the eagle on it. Neither of them said a word for a while. When she finally spoke, it wasn't with fear. It was with steel. "He walked in like he owned the place," she said. "Asked me about break-ins down the street. Said he wanted to check the windows. Then he started wandering. I knew something was off." James nodded, his jaw tight. "You get a badge number?" "No," she said. "But I got his name." He said it like it was supposed to scare me. James Carter didn't scare easy. Not anymore. He'd spent years investigating corrupt cops, had seen how rot settled deep into the walls of justice. Most times it started with a whisper, a missing report, an unchecked lie. But this was different. This was his mother. He went through the house with gloves on, checked for prints, checked the corners for the tiny security cameras he'd installed a year ago, after another incident that never made the news. Most people forgot his mother's house had eyes. He didn't. It took 2 hours, but he found it. Officer Reddick, clear as day, smiling into the lens as he palmed the ring box from the mantel. He didn't even flinch. "You know what this is, Ma?" James asked as he replayed the footage. "This is career suicide. He just doesn't know it yet." Lillian didn't look at the screen. Her eyes were on James. "Don't make this personal." James turned slowly. "It already is." He didn't file a report that night. He started calling contacts. Cross-referenced badge numbers with recent patrols in her neighborhood. Officer Kevin Reddick had a clean file on paper. Commendations. Letters of praise. But James had seen that before. Clean files had dirty hands. The deeper he dug, the more cracks appeared. Officer Reddick had been transferred twice in 5 years. Both times after disputes with supervisors. His partners rotated like clockwork. And there were whispers, little flags that never became complaints. A woman too scared to press charges. A search without a warrant. Missing cash during traffic stops. James had built cases on less. But this time, he wasn't just building a case. He was digging a grave. And by morning, Officer Reddick's name would be the first line in a report that didn't ask questions. It made demands. By sunrise, James was at his desk in the Internal Affairs Division, downtown precinct. The coffee was bitter. The light overhead buzzed like a dying insect. But James didn't notice. His focus was razor sharp. He didn't log into the official system. Not yet. Instead, he opened a ghost file, a mirror drive he used for unofficial work. The kind of investigations that couldn't start with paper trails. He uploaded the footage from his mother's camera. Labeled it, Reddick, Incident 1. Because he knew there would be more. He cross-checked Officer Kevin Reddick's patrol logs for the past 6 months. On paper, everything was clean. But James had worked enough cases to know where to look. Inconsistencies in response times, odd notes in arrest affidavits, body cam footage that mysteriously malfunctioned. And there it was. A woman named Veronica Ellis had filed a complaint 4 months prior. Said an officer entered her home without consent during a wellness check. Said she felt intimidated. Said money was missing. But the complaint was marked unfounded and closed the next day. James called her. She picked up on the second ring. Ms. Ellis, he said, my name is Agent James Carter. Internal Affairs. I'm reopening an inquiry into a visit you received from Officer Kevin Reddick. Silence. Then, why now? Because he hit the wrong house. She exhaled, ragged and heavy. I didn't think anyone would ever call. Tell me what happened. All of it. And she did. There were others, too. Names that surfaced like bones in thawing ground. People with similar stories, small thefts, intimidation, threats that wore a badge. Reddick hadn't been sloppy. He'd just gotten too comfortable. And the department had let him. James compiled it all. Dates, audio, written testimony. Enough to draft a preliminary case. He brought it to his supervisor, Captain Raymond Tiller, a man who prided himself on keeping IA out of politics. A man with a polished badge and a spine made of paper. This is serious, James said, laying out the evidence. Tiller scanned the file, brow furrowing. This is based on footage from your mother's home? Yes. Then you're compromised. You can't run this investigation. James didn't flinch. So assign it. Just don't bury it. Tiller leaned back. Do you know how many times I've seen stories like this fall apart? One mistake, one missing piece, and it's over. You sure you want to go down this road? James nodded. I'm not just going down it. I'm paving it. The file stayed on the desk for a long moment. Then Tiller reached for it. Fine, he said. But if this goes south? It won't. James turned and walked out, his pulse steady, his hands tight. He wasn't chasing justice anymore. He was dragging it out by the collar. Officer Kevin Reddick didn't act like a man in danger. He strutted into the precinct that morning with a travel mug in hand and a grin like he'd just won a bet. He nodded at the receptionist, winked at the rookie cop behind the desk, waved at the watch commander. He moved like someone who believed the system wasn't just behind him, it was built for him. But James Carter was watching from the second floor, behind tinted glass, clipboard in hand, waiting. By 9 a.m., Reddick was in a conference room, not under arrest, not even being questioned, just invited to clarify a few discrepancies. The department was careful with language, internal affairs especially. Words were currency, and everyone knew how easily truth could be laundered into something less damning. James entered the room with a slim file. He didn't offer a handshake. Reddick leaned back in his chair, that smug expression plastered across his face. Didn't know IA worked weekends, he said. We work when the rules are broken, James replied. He laid a still frame on the table. A grainy image. Reddick. Lillian's living room. Jewelry box in hand. The smirk faltered. What's this supposed to be? You tell me. I don't know that house. Looks like a still from some nanny cam. James didn't blink. That's my mother's house. You walked in last night, told her there was a break-in nearby. Then you stole a ring set. That's a federal offense, unauthorized entry and theft under color of law. Reddick laughed, but it was hollow. You're accusing me because your mama misplaced some jewelry? James didn't react. You're not on her patrol log. You weren't dispatched there. And there's no body cam footage because, conveniently, yours was turned off for 90 minutes. Reddick leaned forward. You really want to play this game, Carter? You know how many calls I've made for this department? You know how many times I've been the guy they called to clean up the mess? James's eyes narrowed. Maybe that's the problem. But Reddick didn't flinch. You don't get it. I'm the guy who takes care of problems. who makes sure no paperwork ever hits the chief's desk. You think they're going to hang me for this? Over a ring? He wasn't just smug. He was confident, because he knew something James didn't. And 20 minutes later, James found out what it was. When he returned to his desk, the file was gone. His computer, locked out, and a sealed memo on his chair. Agent James Carter is to recuse himself from the Reddick inquiry effective immediately. Potential conflict of interest. Review pending. Signed by Deputy Commissioner Holt. James stared at the paper for a full minute. Then he folded it neatly and walked to the stairwell. Because now it wasn't just about a crooked cop. It was about who was keeping him clean. James didn't go back to his desk. He didn't pack up. Didn't slam the door. He just kept walking down the stairwell, out the back exit, into the heat of the city like a man walking away from a building already burning. The memo in his pocket felt heavier than it should have. It didn't just recuse him. It erased him. Recused meant silenced. Recused meant shelved. Recused meant someone higher up wasn't just aware of Officer Reddick's sins, they were shielding him. James had spent a decade investigating police corruption, but this was different. This was personal. And the department had just made it official. He was on the outside. But he still had his phone, and one number he hadn't dialed in years. He walked 4 blocks, found a bench in front of a shuttered storefront, sat down, and pulled up the contact. Monica Green, former civil rights attorney, now a federal investigator with the Office of the Inspector General. She used to be the one he called when he found a wall too thick to breach. They hadn't spoken since the last time he'd blown the whistle on a lieutenant who vanished from the force with a pension and a promotion after 3 brutality cases. Monica had gone to the press. James had gone into hiding. For a while, he pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. Carter. He exhaled. I need your help. It's big. And it's rotten. A pause. How rotten? Department protection. Top brass. They just buried an investigation into a patrol officer with a pattern of theft and home invasions. My mother was the last target. Silence. Then, you have proof. I have footage. Testimony. Patterns. But they've already pulled me off. Sealed my system access. Monica didn't miss a beat. You still have the original video? On a separate drive. Offsite. Good, she said. Meet me tonight. 8 p.m. 317, Fulton Street. Basement unit. Don't bring your badge. James ended the call and stared out at the street. Cars passed. Kids yelled across the sidewalk. The world kept moving. But something in him shifted. This wasn't a suspension. This wasn't a slap on the wrist. This was a war. And now, it was federal. Because what Officer Reddick didn't know, what Deputy Commissioner Holt and whoever else was protecting him couldn't have known, was that James Carter never worked alone. Not when it came to justice. Not when it came to family. The basement smelled like damp brick and old secrets. James arrived at 7:57 p.m. No badge. No gun. Just the external hard drive in a messenger bag and the weight of the last 24 hours pressing against his spine. Fulton Street was mostly industrial, the kind of street where no one asked questions after dark. He buzzed twice. The steel door clicked open. Monica Green met him at the top of the steps. Same sharp eyes. Same quiet intensity. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with gray at the temples, but she looked like she hadn't missed a beat. You weren't kidding, she said, locking the door behind them. Come in. The room was lit with bare bulbs and lined with filing cabinets and server racks. A war room, makeshift but efficient. James handed her the drive. Footage from the night he walked into my mother's house. Facial match. Audio. No body cam. No dispatch record. I've got witness statements from 3 others. Similar stories. Suppressed complaints. All leads back to Officer Kevin Reddick. Monica plugged in the drive. Watched the footage in silence. When it ended, she exhaled sharply. He wasn't just casing homes, she said. He was hunting. James nodded. And now the department's protecting him. I was pulled from the case this morning. Internal memos signed by Holt himself. Monica didn't flinch. Holt's name's come up before. Quietly. Nothing stuck. But this could break something wide open. James leaned forward. I need federal oversight. Not just for Reddick. For the whole web. I don't know how far it goes, but someone higher up is laundering this. I can smell it. She opened a locked drawer. Pulled out a folder with a black tab. You're not the first to come to me about Reddick, she said. 3 months ago, I got a tip from a junior officer. Said Reddick's patrol car logs didn't match his reports. Then he got reassigned to traffic detail in the middle of an investigation. Internal silencing. Exactly. She placed a file in front of him, photos, maps, timestamps. Victims, mostly black or elderly. Always alone. Always reluctant to speak. James stared at it. You've been building a case. Monica's eyes narrowed. Now we build it faster. They worked through the night, pulling audio transcripts, cross-checking dispatch records, mapping out a pattern. By 2:13 a.m., the shape of it was clear. Reddick hadn't acted alone. Someone had been ghost-clearing his reports. Approving silence. That kind of digital hygiene required access, deputy level or above. The corruption wasn't just in the patrol car. It was in the mainframe. Monica pulled up her encrypted line. I'm calling DOJ oversight in the morning, she said. But we need to move quietly. You're radioactive right now. They'll come after you. James didn't flinch. Let them. Monica gave him a look. You sure you're ready for what happens next? He met her eyes. They came into my mother's house. Her nod was slow. Respectful. Then let's burn their house down. By sunrise, the plan was in motion. Monica didn't sleep. Neither did James. They ran through lists of dispatchers, sergeants, data analysts, anyone with access to the system that housed officer logs. The trail wasn't just about Reddick anymore. It was about the architecture that kept him clean. And that meant chasing digital footprints through a labyrinth of permissions and cover codes. At 8:01 a.m., Monica placed the call. Special Agent Dina Ramirez, she said into the secure line. DOJ oversight. Code blue flag initiated. I'm submitting encrypted evidence and requesting full forensic review of LAPD internal systems. James stood behind her, file in hand. Ramirez didn't need convincing. We've been waiting on a key. Monica replied, I just found it. 2 hours later, a quiet team of federal cyber forensics arrived. Not sirens. No press. Just plainclothes agents with briefcases full of encryption tools and the calm demeanor of people who dismantle digital lies for a living. By noon, they were inside. And by 1:47 p.m., they hit gold. The screen blinked. Match found. Officer Kevin Reddick's patrol logs had been manually adjusted on at least 12 separate occasions. The alterations were buried deep, timestamped by a secondary user ID known only as admin, X7. That ID was flagged in 5 other internal investigations, all of which had quietly closed with no action taken. But the real twist? Admin, X7's credentials were tied not to a patrol officer or sergeant. They were tied to Deputy Commissioner Holt's executive assistant. James stared at the screen. He was laundering access. Monica's jaw tightened. Everything Reddick did, Holt was either authorizing it or cleaning it. Agent Ramirez appeared beside them. We're moving. Full sweep. Holt's office, digital records, comms. Quiet until the last second. James nodded. What about Reddick? Ramirez raised an eyebrow. He's about to find out what it feels like to be hunted. An hour later, Holt's personal office was under federal control. He arrived back from lunch to find his door sealed and his assistant under escort. You want to explain this? Holt demanded, voice echoing down the hallway. Monica stepped forward. You'll have that chance. In federal court. James didn't look at him. Didn't speak. He didn't need to. Because Holt saw it in his eyes. The thing men like him never expect. Accountability. Back at the precinct, Reddick's chair was empty. His patrol car gone. His radio offline. A bolo went out. Unmarked. Silent. Only 3 precincts even knew about it. But James did. And he knew Reddick wouldn't run far. Not because he wasn't afraid, but because men like Reddick never thought they'd have to run at all. Officer Kevin Reddick wasn't answering his phone. His personal cell pinged once on a tower near Inglewood at 3:08 p.m., then vanished. His patrol car was located, empty, in a residential alley behind a boarded-up laundromat. No prints. No keys. Just the faint scent of arrogance and something sour or panic. James stood over the vehicle, arms crossed, jaw set. He ditched it, he said, to no one in particular. Monica arrived 10 minutes later, Agent Ramirez behind her. They tracked Reddick's department fob, his proximity keycard, only to find it disabled 3 hours earlier. Someone had pulled his access. He knew the net was tightening, Ramirez said. This isn't just fleeing. This is someone who's been briefed. James felt the words like sandpaper in his chest. Someone tipped him. Ramirez nodded. Which means this thing's bigger than Holt. The DOJ had already pulled warrants on Holt's communications. What they found was damning. Late-night texts to the mayor's liaison, encrypted messages to unidentified users tagged in off-the-books reports, and one especially curious call the night before James was removed from the case, 23 minutes long. to a private number in Beverly Hills, registered to a retired captain. Name, Nathan Bridger. Old school. Retired 5 years ago after 2 decades of exemplary service. Known for his quiet influence in disciplinary boards. Word around the precinct was that Bridger still had the ear of high-level brass. And Reddick? He was Bridger's old trainee. Monica tapped the file. That's the handler. James stared at the photo of Bridger. Gray hair. Polished metals. The kind of face people didn't question. He's not just covering Reddick, James said. He built him. They moved fast. Tracked Bridger's property. Pulled his financials. What they found was a cabin 2 hours outside the city. Quiet. Secluded. Off-grid. At 5:30 p.m., they rolled out. Federal agents in unmarked SUVs. James rode in the lead car, silence thick as asphalt. At 7:41 p.m., they arrived. The cabin was dark. Too dark. Then a light flicked on inside. Monica raised her hand. Go silent. Breach only if confirmed. But James was already moving. He knew Reddick. Knew how rats moved when the floor gave out. And he was right. Inside the cabin, they found Reddick. Hands cuffed. Beaten. Gagged. Tied to a chair with a note taped to his chest. Loose ends rot. NB. Monica stared. He turned on his own soldier. James didn't look away. He's not cleaning up. He's burning evidence. Reddick's eyes fluttered. Barely conscious. Bruised and broken, but alive. They called for medical. Ramirez radioed in backup. As they loaded Reddick into the ambulance, Monica turned to James. He's not the villain anymore, she said. James shook his head. No, he's the witness. Because the game had changed. And the man who had built the rot was now trying to bury it. But he was too late. Because now, Reddick was talking. Kevin Reddick's mouth was wired shut, but his eyes did most of the talking. The hospital room was guarded, sealed, and under full federal watch. Monica stood on one side of the bed, James on the other. Agent Ramirez leaned against the wall with a legal pad in hand, silent but alert. They'd waited 12 hours for Reddick to stabilize. 12 hours for the swelling to go down enough that he could scribble on a notepad. When they handed him the pen, he stared at it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Then he wrote 2 words, help me. James didn't move. You stole. You lied. You walked into my mother's house like it was yours. Why would we help you now? Reddick didn't flinch. He just scribbled more. Fast. Unsteady. Words bleeding over the lines. They trained us. Bridger. Holt. Others. Said we were the cleaners. Monica read aloud. What does that mean? Clean what? More scratching. High-risk cases. Calls that needed to go away. Usually black or poor. We were told to neutralize outcomes. Sometimes that meant evidence. Sometimes people. The silence that followed was total. James felt it hit his lungs like cold water. You're saying this was coordinated, Monica said. Reddick nodded, then winced. Wrote again. We were told they were threats. Always threats. Threats to community safety. To perception. They gave us names. Told us how to write the reports. James leaned in. Who gave you names? Reddick's hand trembled. Then he wrote one more name. ADA Monroe. 2017 to 2023. Ramirez stiffened. Monroe's still active. James remembered Monroe. Smiled too easily. Cut deals behind closed doors. The kind of prosecutor who never lost because he never let things go to trial. Reddick underlined the name 3 times. Then scrawled. All of it. Emails. Videos. He keeps them. Insurance. James looked to Monica. Where? Reddick tapped his hand against the rail. Morse code. Short, long. Then scribbled. Locker. Station 52. Code 8789. That was a volunteer firehouse in East LA, repurposed for document storage. James turned to Ramirez. We need that locker now. If Monroe's holding leverage, it means this thing's been protected by the courts as well as the cops. Monica spoke low, sharp. We're looking at a systemic operation. Not just a few bad actors. A machine. Ramirez nodded. And we just found the blueprint. An hour later, agents were at Station 52. The locker was real. The code worked. And what they found inside changed everything. USB drives. Hard copies. Unredacted police reports. Memos with Monroe's signature. Case numbers matching sealed files. Photos, unpublished, raw. Evidence never submitted to court. Victims who never saw justice. It was a black box of corruption. And at the center? Bridger. Holt. Monroe. And others still unnamed. James stared at the files as they loaded onto DOJ servers. They were never hiding it, he said. They just built a place where no one thought to look. Monica's voice was soft but lethal. They thought they were above the law. Ramirez replied. Now we'll show them what law actually means. Because the game was over. Now it was war. It started with sealed envelopes. Thick, beige, and cold as a blade. Each one addressed by hand. Delivered by federal agents to precincts, court offices, and private law firms across Los Angeles. The contents were simple: subpoenas, warrants, indictments. By noon, the city's legal and law enforcement elite had stopped whispering and started dialing lawyers. 37 names. Officers, administrators, prosecutors, and one sitting judge. ADA Monroe's arrest was quiet but symbolic, taken in broad daylight from the front steps of the courthouse. Cameras caught it, because someone wanted them to. Handcuffed. Coat half-buttoned. Still holding the coffee he never got to sip. James watched the footage from Monica's office, his face unreadable. Feels like a movie, Ramirez muttered. No, James said. Movies end with closure. This is a beginning. What the DOJ had uncovered was unprecedented. Not just corruption, but orchestration. A system that turned public servants into silencers. Ridger and Holt had acted like generals, directing Reddick and others to clean, problematic arrests. Monroe's role was even more insidious, curating evidence, suppressing charges, and ghostwriting narratives for court. They'd buried complaints, destroyed careers, ruined lives. And now, it was all coming up. Federal prosecutors began prepping what they called the collapse case, a sweeping RICO-style prosecution against a domestic criminal network masquerading as a justice system. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. RICO for cops, Monica said. First time we've tried it like this. James raised an eyebrow. It'll stick. Monica glanced at the wall of evidence. If it doesn't, it's because the rot goes higher than we thought. But they weren't done. In the files from Monroe's locker, they found sealed transcripts from internal hearings, meetings that had supposedly never occurred, including one that mentioned James by name. A closed-door meeting, 3 months prior. Topic: Agent Carter, potential liability. I was a target, James muttered. Correction, Monica said. You were the threat. The hearing had proposed removing James not just from his post, but from the department. Smeared. Disgraced. The plan had only failed because James hadn't given them time to move. You weren't supposed to find Reddick, Monica said. You were supposed to look the other way. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because this wasn't just about Reddick anymore. This was about the institution, the badge, the oath, and how those who wore it forgot what it meant. But James hadn't. And now the whole country would remember. The indictments triggered chaos. Within 48 hours, union reps flooded the airwaves. Cable pundits cried political persecution. Pro-police groups staged press conferences. And in precincts across the county, a quiet resistance began. Officers not answering calls, radios falling silent. They called it the blue slowdown. James had seen it before. When accountability felt too close, the ranks didn't close, they scattered. Not from fear. From loyalty to the lie. But this time, something had shifted. Because now, the public knew the names. They'd seen Monroe in cuffs. They'd read the transcripts. They'd heard the recordings, one especially damning clip of Bridger laughing over drinks. Sometimes the cleanup's messier than the crime. But hell, who's going to check the janitor? Monica's team received dozens of new tips. Some anonymous. Some desperate. Officers who had followed orders and were now trying to jump ship. But the biggest tip came from inside. A young sergeant named Elena Velez. She'd worked under Holt's chain. Kept her head down. Filed her reports. Never asked questions. Until she'd seen Reddick punch a handcuffed man outside a liquor store. Watch Monroe make it disappear. Her complaint? Misfiled. Her protest? Unsubstantiated. Now she stood across from James in a DOJ safe house. Eyes tired, voice steady. I've got copies, she said. Logs. Emails. Notes from every shift I worked. They used me to clean up after him. I didn't know it at the time. But I do now. James looked at her. Why now? She didn't blink. Because your mother could have been mine. That night, her files confirmed the last piece. A second network. One that linked precincts not just through misconduct, but compensation, private security contracts, off-duty protection deals, funded by donors connected to city council campaigns. It wasn't just officers. It was politics. A whole ecosystem built on looking away. By the time Monica assembled the task force brief, The evidence covered 3 whiteboards, 2 floors, and a digital case file the size of a server. James stood at the center. This started with his mother's ring box. Now it was a reckoning, one that reached into every corner of the city. But the machine wasn't done, because just before midnight, Monica got the call. Her vehicle had been tampered with. Brakes cut. Found before ignition, but only barely. And at that same moment, James's phone buzzed. No name. Just a message. You think this ends with court? You still don't understand the rules. James stared at the screen, then looked up at Monica. They just switched tactics, he said. Yeah, she replied. And now it's survival. The federal safe house was no longer safe. By morning, 2 other whistleblowers had gone dark. One, a records clerk, failed to show up for a scheduled debrief. The other, a city IT contractor, was found in his car, unconscious but alive. Pills in the passenger seat. Suicide attempt, the report said. But James had seen too many of these setups to buy the story. They weren't trying to erase evidence anymore. They were trying to terrify it into silence. Monica moved fast. She relocated her team to a DOJ substation 3 cities away. Agents rotated in every 4 hours. Entry logs went paper only. Surveillance sweeps became routine. But the paranoia was real, even among the honest, even among the brave. James kept replaying the text message in his head. You still don't understand the rules. He understood now. This wasn't about law. This was about power. The kind that wore robes, drove unmarked cars, and shook hands behind fundraisers. The kind that had whispered in Reddick's ear and taught him how to smile while robbing someone's grandmother. But it was also about something older than power. It was about fear. Because nothing frightened a corrupt system more than a survivor who speaks. James stood outside the substation that night, watching the horizon bleed orange over the city. I know why they're lashing out, Monica said beside him. Why? Because they've always been shadows. You gave them a shape. You put faces to it. You made it human. James turned to her, eyes dark. Then I'll make it personal. She studied him. You're not just trying to expose them anymore, are you? No. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I want every one of them to feel what they made people feel. Small. Watched. Powerless. The next day, they made a decision. They wouldn't wait for court. They'd go public. Monica called a press conference. Federal authorization. No leaks. No previews. James would speak. Not as an agent, but as a son. A witness. A citizen. The plan was simple. Drop the first wave of evidence. Let the media carry the fire. Force city officials to react in real time. Make silence look like complicity. But the night before the conference, another message came. This time, delivered by courier. No name. No return address. Inside the envelope, a photograph. Lillian Carter, James's mother, at the grocery store, smiling. And beneath it, written in ink. Everyone breaks eventually. James's hand curled into a fist. He looked to Monica. Security detail now. Every hour. We've already got people on her, she said. They try it. They die trying. But James didn't answer. Because he knew this wasn't just about protecting his mother anymore. It was about ending the people who thought she could be used as leverage. And tomorrow, the world would learn exactly how far he was willing to go. The city had never seen James Carter in front of a camera. Not like this. The courthouse steps were lined with reporters, tripods, microphones, shoulder cams. The kind of crowd reserved for mayoral arrests or celebrity trials. But today, they weren't here for gossip. They were here for a reckoning. James adjusted the mic. The wind pushed against his suit jacket. His eyes scanned the crowd, then locked forward. I'm Agent James Carter. I've worked internal affairs for 12 years. I've investigated officers, broken silence, and tried to believe in the system I was raised to serve. He paused. The air hung still. Last week, my mother was robbed. By a man with a badge. Murmurs rippled through the press line. That man, Officer Kevin Reddick, is not an isolated case. He is a product of training, of silence, of protection from people in this very city's government and legal system. James pulled out a single sheet of paper. Raised it. These are the first 15 names of those under federal indictment. Officers. Prosecutors. Command staff. People who covered for abuse, destroyed evidence, and treated citizens like obstacles to be removed. Flashes exploded around him. But this isn't about vengeance. It's about truth. The kind they tried to bury behind files and titles. The kind they threatened my mother to suppress. He looked into the camera. Not at the lens. Through it. You came into the wrong house. You thought a black woman living alone was an easy mark. You thought her silence was bought with age. What you didn't know, what you never imagined, is that she raised a son who keeps receipts. Behind him, Monica nodded. Ramirez flanked the stairs. James continued. This isn't a press stunt. This is a public warning. If you wore the badge and used it to steal, silence, or scar, your name's already in the file. And we're not going to court quietly. The crowd leaned forward. Because justice doesn't belong behind sealed doors. It belongs here. Out loud. He stepped back. For a moment, there was nothing but wind and blinking shutters. Then the first question. Agent Carter, what do you say to the officers who claim this is a witch hunt? James didn't smile. He didn't blink. I say if you're scared, check your mirror. The press conference trended within the hour. By nightfall, city officials were distancing themselves from Holt. A councilman resigned. A judge went on sabbatical. The machine was sputtering. But James knew better. The next move wouldn't come with paperwork. It would come with fire. Because when corrupt power loses control of the story, it always reaches for the fuse. They didn't wait long to strike. At 3:12 a.m., a blackout swept through the DOJ's temporary field office. Generators failed. Locks reset. For 32 minutes, they were blind. When power returned, it was quiet. Too quiet. James knew what that meant. He stormed into the data room. One of the servers gone. Not destroyed. Not erased. Physically removed. A full rack of backup drives, including the files Monica had pulled from Monroe's locker. The hard copies remained. But the raw, unfiltered evidence, the videos, audio, metadata, gone like smoke. This wasn't a warning, Monica said, staring at the empty bay. This was sabotage. Agent Ramirez's jaw tightened. Inside job. No doubt. James didn't blink. They're trying to reset the narrative. And then the call came. Private line. No ID. Monica answered. Silence. Then a familiar voice, raspy, mocking, composed. You made this public. So here's your consequence. Click. At that exact moment, Monica's phone vibrated again. Text message. No words. Just a live stream link. They clicked it open. The screen loaded grainy footage, cell phone camera, shaky hands. A woman, elderly, seated at a table. James's stomach dropped. His mother, Lillian Carter, blindfolded. A hand, just off frame, adjusting the camera. And then a voice. Reddick's voice. I told you not everyone breaks the same way. But bones still bend. And mothers. James moved before the sentence finished. Monica barely kept up. Ramirez issued the trace order. The signal was routed through 6 proxies. Too slow for retime recovery. But there was a ping, just one, near a construction site 5 miles south of the original precinct. James was already out the door. South Fairfax District, for 01 a.m. The construction lot was fenced, dim, forgotten. James arrived alone. No vest. No backup. Just rage and blood in his hands. He moved like a shadow, eyes darting between concrete pillars. Then he heard it, muffled breath. A cough. Behind a stack of rebar, he found her. Alive. Bruised. But conscious. And beside her? A man. Not Reddick. Older. Slower. Nathan Bridger. Gun in hand. Calm. You brought this on her, he said. You brought this on all of us. James didn't speak. He just stepped forward. Bridger raised the weapon. But James didn't stop. And neither did Monica, who emerged from the dark, gun-trained. Drop it. Bridger hesitated. Then smirked. You think justice matters now? You've burned the building down. But the foundation's still ours. James lunged. The weapon hit the floor. And in seconds, Bridger was face down, cuffed. As sirens closed in, Lillian reached out to her son. He took her hand. Gently. Fiercely. I'm sorry, he whispered. She shook her head. No. You did what I taught you to do. And for the first time in weeks, James let the tears come. Because justice had come with bruises. But it had come. The courtroom was packed. Not with protesters. Not with press. With witnesses. People who had lived in the margins of Reddick's beat. People whose stories had once been called insufficient. Grandmothers. Store clerks. Delivery drivers. A boy who had seen his father slammed against the hood of a cruiser for reaching for his ID. They all sat in silence now, waiting for the gavel. Bridger stood in shackles. So did Reddick, escorted by 2 federal marshals. Hollowed. Reduced. No longer the wolf. Just a man caught in the trap he helped build. And James? He stood as a witness. One final time. The prosecutor addressed the judge. Your Honor, what we've uncovered is not merely criminal behavior. It is institutionalized corruption. It is the legacy of a culture that mistook silence for order and fear for respect. But the silence was broken, not by politics, not by power, but by an elderly woman who remembered her dignity, and a son who refused to look away. The judge nodded. A black woman. Stern. Measured. Officer Reddick, she said, you weaponized your badge. You targeted the vulnerable. You believed the law would shield you. She turned to Bridger. And you, Captain Bridger, taught him to do it. Then to the gallery. We cannot rewrite what was taken from this community, but we can carve in stone what will no longer be tolerated. The verdict, guilty, on all counts. Sentencing followed, 25 years for Reddick, 30 for Bridger, and more trials were coming, dozens. As James stepped outside, the press surged. He raised his hand. Just once. No more statements, he said. We've said enough. Now it's your turn to listen, to vote, to watch the watchers. His mother stood beside him. Her bruises had faded. Her eyes hadn't. They thought they knew what kind of woman lived in that house, she whispered. They forgot whose son I raised. Monica joined them, clipboard under her arm. The DOJ wants you in D.C. Next phase. Policy. Reform. You ready? James looked out at the courthouse. Then up. They broke the rules, he said. We'll write new ones. That night, at home, Lillian placed her ring box back on the mantel. The stolen pieces returned. The wounds dressed. But what mattered more was the frame beside it. James's academy photo. And beside it, a note in her handwriting. They came into the wrong house and left through the right door. Justice isn't just a gavel. It's a house with walls made of memory and doors that never shut on the truth.